Hello there, folks. I didn't see you come in. This is Kevin, your friendly neighborhood co-host of the Shelf Life podcast, giving you a little bit of an introduction into our mini episode that we've decided to do here, discussing a little bit about the comic books that we will be covering on the show and some different terminology or different ways that we plan to cover comic books on the show. We thought it might be a little bit helpful to give a little background on where we come from with comics, what we think the order of how we might do these things is, stuff like that. And a little bit more on different aspects of comic books and what kind of comics we might be covering as we go through the show, which, if you haven't gotten by now, we plan to do everything in as much minutia as possible, no matter how bored or exciting it is. So strap in for that. But this is going to give you a little bit of a background on it. We were doing our show on Old Man Logan, which is the next episode, and we decided that maybe some of this could be done on its own to give a little bit of, whether you're a veteran comic reader, whether you've never picked up a comic book in your life, you can get a little bit out of it, and we can see and you can get some information as to what you can expect from the show. So enjoy. So we need to talk about a little bit of how these comic stuffs work, because not everybody reads the comics. I think everybody out there is well aware of the cinematic universe that is the MCU and the DCEU and the Miller world and whatever the Boys is part of. But not as many people read comic books. It is more niche. We're all about niche here. We're all about enjoying comic books. I've been a comic book reader my entire life, lapsed at some point around high school, and came back thanks to the glory that is the graphic novel of House of M. And
oh yes,
I think Rachel, you followed suit. So one thing to keep in mind, or a couple of things. I am staunchly a Marvel comics reader, so for the fans out there that are more DC, you're going to have to help us a little bit on what we should consider for the shelf from the DC side. I own some Batman stuff. I'm a big Batman fan as well, but I don't know the DC side nearly as well as the Marvel side. But we'll start here, and then we'll figure out exactly where we want to go after this. Rachel, I've also determined a couple of other things.
Okay.
When it comes to the comics and the continuity. And I'll speak specifically for the Marvel side of things, and I think when we talk about the DC side, we may need our listeners to help us figure out when the breaking points are for continuity. But when it comes to Marvel, I think we need to read some of these stories in certain orders because of the fact that one can bleed into the other. And for the folks at home, if you do want to listen or read or pick it up if we give a recommendation or we say, like, you should check it out, or you want to get into reading the comics, it might be easier for you at that point, too. So here's what I've got for us for the timeline. I think it'll work like this. This happens to be an alternate universe story, so we can read it out of context. And I think we can read anything that's alternate out of context.
Right.
But the Marvel Universe started approximately 1962, really 1939 with Human Torch and Namor, but let's say for the sake of modern times, it starts in 1962. So I think you have a block from 1962 to the night when Stacy died. I think you have from that date to...
Spoiler alert.
I think you have a block from that day to Secret Wars. And then you have Secret Wars to Onslaught. And then you have the worst comics ever made from Onslaught to Heroes Reborn. And then you have the Heroes Reborn to Avengers Disassembled to Secret Wars, again, 2015. And then you have the modern era, which is after Secret Wars until now. The all-new, all-different Marvel. And the only reason I say that, and listeners, let me know if you think that this doesn't make sense, but I think what I mean by that, Rachel, is that we could do... Next time in the comics world, we could do Avengers Disassembled. We wouldn't then go do Secret Invasion because we would be missing Civil War and House of M and a bunch of stuff in between there. So we want to do those groups in order so that you kind of, because they are bigger parts of a fuller story.
Right.
But I don't also want to start in 1962 because we will never get to 2015's Secret Wars.
That is also true. There are so many. You kind of have to pick and choose the arcs that you want to play with.
And some of those arcs are better than others. We're familiar with some of those arcs more than others, but that's why we're here. And obviously, listeners, let us know if there are particular story arcs that we should cover on the show, because we definitely will.
The bad or the good, obviously, because
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
heck, why not read and look at the bad and kind of and critique it and see what's wrong with it and see why that story just did not work.
Absolutely. And there's some that we might think are better than historically readers don't think are good, and vice versa. I will say this to transition into both that topic of good and bad and to the DC side of it, because since we're talking about the comics and the continuity.
Yes.
There are limitations when it comes to comic books, and the limitation is the characters are only allowed to grow so much before they have to be brought back to a status quo,
Right.
so that the next editors and writers can do what they want to do with the character. I sometimes wish that they would have groupings where it's like the writers and the artists and the editors are allowed to do whatever they want to do, and then you're like, okay, reset the universe somehow for the next group. But
Right.
that still happened, and it happened in universe 616, and then the next universe is 617, and then we just kind of do a new thing with the characters.
Exactly, yeah.
But sometimes I feel like that could upset people that have been reading them for 50 years too, so who knows what the right answer is.
They walk that line of pissing everybody off, pretty much.
Well, I mean, I feel like the big two, especially Marvel and DC, cannot win, because
Oh no.
there's fans out there. I mean, and hopefully I hope that I'd be considered like someone that just, I love comic books, I love superheroes, and I want to read good books. And if I don't like a book, I don't like a book, and I say like that was dumb, and I leave it out of my head canon. But there are some people out there that go up in fucking arms about the stupidest things when it comes to comic books.
Right.
And it's like, all right, calm down.
Very passionate people, very. Which isn't it's not like a bad thing, but it's kind of like we understand, you know?
Yeah, and there's bad shit. Like, I will go on rants when we talk about Spider-Man One More Day, or some of the worst shit you've ever seen. Like, who approved this? We'll talk about it.
Oh yeah. Now, I noticed something. You haven't really mentioned a lot of out of Marvel and DC type of comics. Are we planning on doing anything that aren't in those realms?
Folks at home, do not worry if you do not like Marvel and DC. We will talk about independent comics. We will talk about Image Comics. We'll talk about Boom Comics. We will talk about the Power Rangers comics, which are way better than they have any right to be. They are very good.
Excellent.
We'll talk about the Teenage Mutant Goddamn Ninja Turtles, because that is how I started reading comic books at the age of 3 years old. Was reading the Archie Comics Ninja Turtles. We will talk about Saga. We'll talk about Why the Last Man. We'll talk about The Boys, even though the TV show is better. Fight me, I don't care. We can go through all of this stuff, because that's what we are here for, because we are going to be doing this until we are 90 years old, so we might as well. I mean, do you agree, Rachel?
Yes. No, I completely
agree. Did you
agree.
have anything in particular that was outside the big two?
No. I just wanted to make sure that our listeners understand that we're not just going to leave it at that. You know, we're not leaving it as the big stuff. We like to get in the nitty gritty. We like to get into the little guys as well. So.
And for those of you out there that do not like comics, you thought about turning off the episode, but you're a completist when it comes to you have to determine if you're putting this episode on your shelf. It's not all superheroes, and if you haven't gotten it from here, Rachel and I are not gonna turn you off. If anything, we're gonna talk about this, and we're gonna make you want to read the book, or you're gonna want to read the book because it's so bad.
Or you're just gonna want to look at the art, because sometimes I'm just like, yes, when it comes to the artwork in the comics.
I mean, and spoiler alert, we're not starting off with something that we don't have a lot to talk about, or don't necessarily. Like, we're not starting off with something boring. Let me put it that way.
Not at all.
This is far from a mediocre, boring, middle-of-the-road book. When it comes to the DC universe, I do not know where breakpoints are. I know it starts in the 30s, and then every decade has a slightly different tone, and then Crisis on Infinite Earths blew it up, and then there were more crises, and then there was the New 52, and I think it's rebooting again, or has recently. So I just don't know how to break that out as well.
Okay.
But I don't want to be ignorant of DC just because I don't. It will open up my eyes to more DC stuff.
Right.
I've always preferred the tone of the Marvel books more and the art, to be honest.
Sure.
So yeah, we'll definitely get into more books, but one thing that I'll say about comics is the writing can be great or the art can be great, and if they're not both great, it can really change your experience of reading a book.
Does. It really does.
And it doesn't even have to be great. It just has to fit together. Like if the drawing doesn't fit the story's tone, for some reason it just doesn't work. I'm gonna use this example, and I know that there's problems with the writing, as I've heard. I have not read this yet, but I do own the graphic novel book, and I need to read it. But I can tell you right now that I have an issue with the art. And I don't have an issue with the artist. I think the artist is really good. But there's a Marvel graphic novel called Secret Empire, and it's when Captain America does his heel turn, and we'll get there. But the first issue is drawn by Steve McNiven, and it fits the tone of a fascist, crazed world.
Okay.
The next issue is drawn by Andrea Sammartino. I'm probably saying that name wrong, but he's got more flourish and shadows. And it looks more something like
Are they
that
brighter?
would fit Doctor Strange. No, it's darker. It's like more pastel.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and I just feel like it doesn't fit.
McNiven does a nice muted tones, especially for this one. So it kind of has that
dark backgrounds, almost photorealistic.
Right, and then there's some colors in places. Very that's kind of how I see it. So you're saying they're a bit pastel-y? Are you saying so that's not a muted tone, it's more of it's got a bit more color to it?
Yes. Rachel, I think we need to bring up the idea of headcanon and what that means when we say that, because we're going to say it a lot on this
We
show.
are going to say that a lot.
So when something is in canon, it means it's part of the official story. So I always think of it as the Bible. If all 12 apostles and Mary Magdalene wrote a gospel, 9 of them are not canon. There's only 4 books that became canonized by the church, which means that they're the official story.
Right.
So fan fiction, all the Star Wars fan fiction that was written by people, or all the books that were written for Star Wars, all that stuff. According to Disney, all that stuff is not in the canon.
Yep.
It was in the canon before Lucas got bought out. So when we say the term headcanon, what we're talking about, and a lot of people think this way, I definitely think this way, this is how I cipher out stuff that is shitty.
Absolutely.
Is headcanon is the principle that yes, that is part of the story, but it's not in my headcanon.
Yep.
Or my headcanon, this is the backstory that I came up with to justify XYZ, or it enhances it for me, that's headcanon. And that's it. So I hope that was helpful for those of you that have any other feedback or want us to cover any other terminology or discussion about what could be done with comic books or what we could do with the show. Please let us know. I think that we're planning to do more, obviously, in the future, depending on different feedback that we get from all of the listeners, or however we end up liking to do it ourselves, because at the end of the day, let's be honest, we're going to do what we want anyway. But I think that hopefully this gives you a bit of an idea of where we're coming from when we start discussing the comic books. We just wanted to do it because it's a completely different genre than you'd see from somebody doing the previous episodes that we did. And or if you're in with us for this ride, there might not be as many comic book readers out there that there are movie and TV fans, and we wanted to make sure that you have an open mind and maybe you crack open that book. But either way, please let us know if there's anything else that we should cover before we get too far into the ridiculous continuity and timeline that is the major comic book lines. So, with that being said, look for that drop of the Old Man Logan episode. See you next time.